Hey, welcome back everybody. Happy Sunday. Hope we're all having a wonderful time out there, and hopefully we had a wonderful week, and hopefully a pretty restful week, because we've got a big time stretch of weather coming up here with multiple storm systems, many of them bringing blizzard conditions, severe weather, flooding, and a little bit of everything else, as well as a major Arctic air outbreak on the way for much of the lower 48 as we go a little deeper here into our January. Now, this is going to be a very active month, I'll just tell you now. I can already see it in the models for at least really the next 10 days. We're going to have multiple rounds of ice, snow, likely maybe even some severe weather mixed in there as well. I'll go ahead and break all of that down for you in today's video. Now, if you haven't already subscribed, definitely consider doing so. Like the video if you like it, and comment. Let me know where you're watching from and what you're seeing out there. I promise I'll do better at responding to some of these comments, but I do generally read all of them. I've just been kind of busy preparing for this spring semester that's starting here in a week, so I've been a little busy this weekend. I haven't had too much downtime to work on that, but I promise I'll be better today. So if you have any questions in the comments, feel free to ask me. I'll definitely get around to answering those. Also, if you couldn't tell already by looking kind of below you here, this is going to be a pretty long video. I can almost guarantee you. I'm going to try to keep it around 30 minutes, hopefully not too far over that. But that's just kind of the preliminary goal here, and I imagine that's probably not going to work out super well. One thing I will also mention, I don't think I did mention this already, but if you do have any cool pictures of some of that exciting weather you've seen out there, do not forget to submit those with the link in the description below for a chance to have those featured on the channel. And in fact, to go ahead and get started, we do have our first submission of kind of some exciting weather. This viewer I have tagged below here at the bottom of the picture saw some snow and sleet at their location yesterday, and I imagine they probably got a little bit more than this when all was said and done, but either way, you can see that kind of wintry scene unfolding here for a lot of folks. Again, saw scenes like this in the mid-Atlantic and Northeast yesterday, and that will continue into today as well for a lot of folks, depending on where you're located at. So with all of that said, let's go ahead and dive right into that. So taking a look at our infrared satellite here, you'll notice things are quiet for a section of the country, while other sections of the country are really quite active. In fact, just off the coast of the Northeast, we still have this low pressure spinning away that I just drew on your map, and that still has a shield of precipitation that is likely going to continue to move eastbound here, bringing more snow for a lot of folks here through sections of Massachusetts, Vermont, New Hampshire, New York State, Maine, even Connecticut and Rhode Island could get in on some more snow this afternoon and evening. Now, the other bigger kind of piece of energy here we need to watch out for is back west. This is that massive trough that we've been talking about. It has continued to kind of dump out into the Rockies, and as we go through today and into tonight, we are going to get a low pressure to form out here, and that will eventually lead to a big time snowstorm, severe weather threat, wind threat, and flooding threat going into the next coming days. And we're going to break that down region by region throughout this video. That's really what most of the video is going to be dedicated to. But don't worry, at the end we will discuss that next storm system as well as that Arctic air outbreak. So we'll kind of try to cover all bases here, even if there's a lot of information to get to. All right. So current watches, warnings, advisories, and radar imagery. Again, the Northeast is where we're seeing the most active weather currently. Again, this big kind of plume of leftover moisture. Most of this is falling as snow currently. And because of that, we still have leftover winter storm warnings through much of the Northeast. Kind of hard to tell on your map here, but I promise you they're kind of hidden under this radar imagery. But definitely let me know how much snow you're seeing at your location. I think a lot of places in western Massachusetts, southern New York State here, are probably already past half a foot of snow, and that's going to continue to pile up this afternoon. Now we are also seeing some snow showers down here in the Ohio River Valley. I did mention this yesterday. On the backside, we had some energy that would move on through. And that's kind of what this blob of precipitation is kind of that short wave in the atmosphere. So thanks to that, we do have some winter weather advisories up for the higher terrains of West Virginia here, as some of these snow showers will move on through and dump a pretty heavy dosing of snow. Now, other than that, the other big story, I'm sure you can see on your map pretty well here, we've got a big area here of watches, warnings, and advisories. Winter storm watches from western Kansas all the way up through northern Missouri, sections of Illinois and Iowa, and winter storm warnings as well for much of Kansas and Nebraska. You also can't see it on this map because it's covered up by these high wind warnings, but we also have blizzard warnings up for sections of Colorado, New Mexico, and I would imagine those will probably get expanded a little bit further towards Kansas as we go a little bit closer to this event, and maybe even up towards Michigan and Wisconsin. as we go throughout today, we'll see more watches and warnings fill in the map here. And back out west, again, just absolutely covered with watches, warnings, and advisories as this very active stretch of weather continues. All right, let's very quickly talk about what's left to come in the Northeast with this snowstorm. Again, it's been snowing for much of today. That will continue. This is about 2 o'clock this afternoon. You'll notice still holding on to rain right at the immediate coast, especially kind of down near Nantucket and Cape Cod, but inland through Boston, much of Rhode Island, Connecticut, still in Vermont, New Hampshire, and southern Maine, that snow still coming down good, and that will continue throughout the evening hours of today before it begins to kind of fizzle out by the time the sun goes down. And we have a much nicer kind of Monday in store here. You'll see this is Monday afternoon. Much clearer radar imagery outside of a couple areas of some lake effect snow potentially there in New York State. All right, snowfall totals here. How much snow left to come? Well, again, I think a lot of folks here to southern New Hampshire, extreme southern Maine, and portions of Massachusetts could still see another half a foot of snow, maybe, if you kind of cash in and get lucky enough here. But widespread, more 3 to 5 inches, I think, is a safer bet through much of this part of the country before all is said and done going into tonight. Alrighty, now let's kind of break this current storm down that we've got left to talk about here region by region. I'm going to quickly move this all the way ahead just so it's nice and loaded for us. Again, throughout this afternoon, we've got snow showers through much of the four corners. Utah, Colorado, Arizona, and New Mexico continuing to see that snowfall, and it will continue to pile up throughout the afternoon today. And even going into this evening, you'll notice still seeing that snow begin to fall. Now, by the time we get into about early tomorrow morning, this is very early, still even before the sun has risen, we now have low pressure beginning to form here, right kind of at the New Mexico, Colorado, Texas, Kansas, Oklahoma, whatever kind of section of the country you want to call that. Almost like 7 points there, although not quite aligned, but either way, you get the point. We'll get low pressure to kind of form around there. Now, we will still be seeing some snow showers on the backside, again, now up to really tomorrow morning, but it's at this point that that low pressure really begins to crank up, and we begin to see a bit of that snowstorm begin to come into frame for tomorrow. So how much snow do we have left here in this part of the country to discuss? Well, Arizona, Utah, sections of Colorado, and New Mexico here, still a good amount. Again, very elevation dependent. The higher elevations obviously seeing the most. The valley seeing really just rain or maybe a little bit of snow, but nothing, to write home about. So again, for these kind of parts of the video, I suggest just pausing, finding your county, and kind of looking up your location and give you a better idea of how much snow you're expecting. Alrighty, with that said, let's go ahead now and dive into this storm system. And again, this one's going to have a lot of impacts. We're going to start here, again, region by region. We're going to begin in kind of the central sections of the plains, and then we're going to go, I think, up to the Midwest is the next section on the map here, I believe, or I might have it in a different order. We'll find out together. But either way, let's go ahead and start talking about this. So again, still a really nice day today through much of the central plains, Kansas, Nebraska, Oklahoma, quite nice day of weather. Now, it's going into kind of overnight tonight and into the early morning hours of tomorrow that things change. Again, this is kind of where we left off. Here's that low pressure beginning to form at the surface, and we're already getting some storms to form kind of in that moist quadrant of this low pressure. Now, if I move this further ahead into time, this is about the time that everyone's waking up tomorrow morning, and this is when things really begin to go downhill. Just in time for Monday morning commute, we've got a line of pretty strong storms here through Oklahoma, and then we have this shield of precipitation now getting thrown back into what is a very cold sector towards Nebraska and Kansas. And by the time we get into tomorrow afternoon, this is what radar's likely to look like, a big shield of heavy, wet snow falling through much of Nebraska, again, Kansas here, seeing a lot of that snow, winds picking up as well, and still seeing some of this very heavy rainfall with some isolated storms embedded there through sections of Oklahoma and northern Texas going into our Monday afternoon. Now, by the time the sun is setting Monday, that snow continuing to crank up, a little bit of a dry slot kind of working in here, so we might get a bit of a lull into Oklahoma, Texas, and kind of central Kansas, as again some dry air kind of gets ingested out of the desert southwest into this low pressure, but still seeing overall widespread snow falling here throughout the evening hours of Monday and even into the overnight hours. And by the time we're waking up on Tuesday, luckily things are beginning to clear out for this section of the country through Nebraska, Kansas, Oklahoma, and down into Texas. But then you'll notice the storm is now shifting off towards the north and towards the east there. So how much snow are we expecting when all is said and done here in this part of the country? Well, I think the highest totals we see, at least in this area, are likely to be up here into portions of eastern Nebraska, where about half a foot of snow is pretty likely. Through much of Kansas, starting in the northern bit, I'd say 3 to 5 inches is going to be pretty easy to come by. And then, totals getting lower as you go further south. Central Kansas, at least latitude-wise, and maybe about 1 to 3 inches. And then by the time you get all the way down towards the Oklahoma border, more of a dusting to an inch there in the snow department. Another map I will show you. I love doing this map. I think it does a good job at overall kind of summarizing what this storm means for your area. Day 1 through 3 overall winter storm impacts. A lot of impacts here. Widespread areas going to see moderate impacts from the snowfall here, indicated by those orange colors on your map, with more limited impacts expected from the Weather Prediction Center here in those yellow kind of colors. All right. So that's that section of the country. Now let's move it up a little bit. Again, this is another part of the country that's still going to be in the kind of the cold, snowy side of this storm system up through portions of the Midwest. Now, again, a really nice day today, but going into Monday afternoon here, you'll notice here comes that storm. Snow likely beginning to break out through northern Missouri, much of Iowa, even into sections of southern Minnesota, seeing that snow begin to fall Monday afternoon. Before eventually going into Monday evening. This is about midnight Monday, kind of in between Monday and Tuesday here. This storm really begins to kind of crank up a good bit. So here we are, seeing snowfall again into much of Iowa, sections of northern Missouri, back into sections of central and northern Illinois, and central and northern Indiana. Now, for some folks, this storm will stay snow the entire time, kind of up in this area where we do have enough cold air to work with. Back here towards Illinois, Indiana, and kind of Ohio, it very well may start as snow, but unfortunately, you'll notice as this low pressure gets a little bit closer and cranks up, here comes that warm air out of the Gulf, cutting into those snowfall totals very quickly through much of Indiana, Ohio, and Illinois. Again, though, if you're kind of up here in this area, still very heavy snow falling, and likely will be snow the entire time through much of Iowa and northwestern Illinois there and into southern Wisconsin. Now, again, this is when we're waking up on Tuesday morning. That snow also working into Michigan at this point. I think very gusty winds and very kind of tough travel conditions there through much of the region. Now, going into Tuesday afternoon, that snow continues to fall through much of Wisconsin, again, Michigan, especially central and northern Michigan, where we have enough cold air locked in that we don't have to worry about this rain-snow line kind of pushing northward. Another thing I will mention, again, overnight Monday into Tuesday, we started as really nice snow even into sections of Ohio there. But by the time we're getting into Tuesday afternoon, here comes that warm air advecting northward, and now we're all rain through much of the Ohio River Valley, while that snow is still continuing up towards kind of Wisconsin and northern Michigan. Same story for Chicago as well. I think we start as snow, but again, here comes that very warm air trying to push northward, and then we're back to rain. But I do think going overnight Tuesday into Wednesday, we could get another surge of cold air on the backside. That could once again bring some snow showers into places that changed over to rain kind of in the middle of the storm here, in, again, the overnight hours of Tuesday going into Wednesday. Now, if you're watching from northern Michigan, the UP of Michigan, likely to be an all-snow event, and this storm is going to really dump a good amount, especially as it kind of hangs around a little bit here overnight Tuesday into Wednesday morning here, and then luckily by the time we're going into Wednesday afternoon, clearing out for much of the area, and we can kind of dig out before, spoiler alert, another storm is on the way, not very far after this one. All right, snowfall totals in this part of the country. Again, the most snow we see here, I think, will be through much of Iowa here, northern Missouri, up into extreme northwestern Illinois, and then into much of eastern Wisconsin, the UP of Michigan, and just northern Michigan proper. Could see widespread, again, about half a foot of snow here. Isolated spots closer to maybe 10 inches, but I think half a foot is a pretty safe bet for a lot of folks in this area. And then again, if you're watching here in Indiana, kind of Ohio, could start very well, I think, as a burst of snow, could even stick, but unfortunately that rain is going to push in quite quickly. Same story here for kind of the Detroit area. So this kind of circled area, likely starting as snow, but transitioning to rain at some point in the storm's life cycle. All right, winter storm impacts in this area. This area goes a little bit more from minor to moderate impacts to, or from moderate to major impacts. So you'll notice some of these red colors kind of sprinkled in over here, indicating travel will be near impossible, and we could even see some power outage problems here, kind of along the Missouri and Iowa border, and even up there into sections of, again, northwestern Illinois, where we could see some pretty healthy snowfall totals. Alrighty, now let's kind of discuss a different side of the storm here, kind of moving south, and this is where we're going to have a big-time severe weather threat with widespread damaging winds and even, I think, a couple isolated tornadoes. In fact, we even saw one yesterday, not from this storm system itself, but we did get our first kind of photogenic tornado of the year in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, where that tornado even caused some damage there throughout the city. So 2024, again, starting off very active here. And unfortunately, after 2023, I think we're no stranger to kind of severe weather and the impacts it can bring. Alrighty, let's go ahead and talk about it here, starting in the southern Great Plains. And you'll notice here through much of Texas and Oklahoma, Arkansas, Louisiana, a nice day today, but here we go into tomorrow morning. By the time we're waking up, here's that line of storms, likely not really too severe at this point, but going later on into Monday, as this approaches the Gulf Coast, this is whenever that severe weather threat increases. Down here into southeastern Texas, into much of Louisiana and southern Mississippi, you'll notice we have kind of some embedded cells here that kind of move on with this line of storms. Very easily, I think, could see a couple tornado warnings tomorrow in this part of the country. If not that, at least some severe thunderstorm warnings for some strong gusty winds. And now this moves through again during the afternoon and evening of Monday, even potentially more storms forming on the backside here, further down towards Houston and kind of the central Texas Gulf Coast there. Those could also, pose a bit of a tornado risk, as well as, again, damaging winds. Now, the good news is these storms kind of, move on out of here by the time we get later into the overnight on Monday. But this is also likely when we go from individual kind of, clustering of cells to a very strong squall line that's going to push through here during the overnight of Monday and into Tuesday. And that likely to bring, again, very strong gusty winds before we're waking up Tuesday morning to much nicer conditions in this part of the country. Alrighty, severe weather, again, also going to be a problem off towards the east from the Carolina coastline, even down into kind of the Piedmont of the Carolinas through much of Georgia and really the entire state of Florida as well on Tuesday, where, again, strong gusty winds and isolated tornadoes are going to be something we have to watch out for here. And we can go ahead and time that out here as well with our latest model guidance. All right, Monday afternoon here. I think Monday afternoon should stay relatively calm for South Carolina, Georgia, Florida, and even much of Alabama. It's going overnight Monday into Tuesday. Here comes that squall line. You'll notice this very strong area of, or a very strong line of thunderstorms slowly pushing eastbound. And this is also when we're going to run into a flooding threat. And I'll show you that map here in just a moment. But the storm system, as it's moving up through the Midwest, it's going to kind of be moving in a direction that doesn't allow very much east to west movement of these storms. And that's going to allow just a lot of Gulf moisture to, ride up into the southern United States and just kind of sit over some of the same areas. And we're going to get very heavy rainfall rates for extended periods of time. That's got me quite worried for some flash flooding here. Now, this is by the time we're waking up Tuesday morning. This is when the severe weather threat will begin to kind of reignite a little bit here. Again, we had that threat area from the eastern Carolinas down into Georgia and into Florida. And you'll notice that's where we still have the warm sector here going into Tuesday morning and eventually Tuesday afternoon. Now, what I want you to notice here is Tuesday morning, by the time we're waking up, this very heavy band of rainfall likely stretching from the Florida Panhandle up through Atlanta. And by the time we get into the afternoon, again about 6 hours later here, maybe even 8 hours later, that very heavy band of rainfall, strong gusty winds and isolated tornadoes is now stretching from Charlotte down through Columbia, Jacksonville, and even into kind of the central Florida Big Bend area. Now, why is that significant? Well, within 8 hours, this entire line of storms has only moved maybe 200 or 300 miles in one direction, and that's why, again, we have that flooding threat. It's going to be quite a problem here, and we'll also have to watch for this warm sector here into the eastern Carolinas going into Tuesday afternoon. Still a little too far away from our mesoscale models, but do we get some individual cells to maybe ride up off of the Atlantic and into these areas? That could pose a heightened tornado risk as well here for Tuesday afternoon. The good news is, though, by the time we go overnight Tuesday and we're waking up Wednesday, things should be much calmer, and we'll get a little bit of a break, again, before another storm system arrives later this coming week. All right, again, mentioning that flooding threat, this is for Monday, just Monday. We have a moderate threat of flash flooding for much of the New Orleans metro down through Biloxi and Mobile as well. Again, that shield of rain is going to sit over some of the same areas, and that could even cause flooding problems further inland towards Jackson, Mississippi, Birmingham, even up towards Huntsville and kind of Meridian, Mississippi, and back towards Memphis as well. Could see some flooding problems there on our Monday. All right, next area we're going to talk about here, let me actually back this map up just a little bit. I'm even going to refresh the page to make sure we are functioning properly. Here we go. So the Ohio River Valley is kind of going to be the Goldilocks child, if you will, of this storm system. We're going to see impacts here, don't get me wrong, but we're going to be kind of stuck in between the cold side that has the wintry, travel impacts and the warm side that has some of those severe weather impacts. So in this part of the country, it's going to be more of just a lot of rain, and we could see flooding. But I think, again, the bigger flooding threat is going to be further to the south. So either way, let's go ahead and time this out. Monday evening going into Tuesday, here we are, that shield of rain moving in. And again, likely to just kind of sit over some of these same areas for much of the overnight of Monday and getting into our Tuesday. Again, just seeing a lot of rain continuing to fall in some of these areas. Now that rain will continue again throughout much of the day Tuesday, even heavy rain kind of moving in through much of Kentucky, Tennessee, Indiana, and into Ohio before we kind of clear out a little bit going overnight Tuesday into Wednesday. Now, as that is occurring, we could see a couple snow showers and rain showers kind of linger here on the backside with a punch of cold air and energy overnight Tuesday into Wednesday. Could bring a very quick dusting of snow maybe to some isolated spots, but overall speaking, again, this is kind of the area that we're going to luck out a little bit where the impacts aren't too bad on the snowy side. They're not very bad on the severe weather side either. Just kind of a lot of cold rain for a lot of people here. Now, one thing I will mention that will be a bit of a problem in this part of the country is going to be the wind gusts. Again, rain is going to be the main precipitation type, not really worrying about severe weather or ice or snow, but the winds will definitely pick up here and cause some problems as we're going to be very close to that center of low pressure. Now, this is 6-hour max wind gusts, so I don't want you to think this is kind of the sustained wind gusts that we're going to see, over a period of time. This is likely as strong as the winds will be at any point during the storm. And again, just gusting to this, not really sustaining. But either way, you'll notice these very strong wind gusts do kind of push up the Tennessee River Valley here through much of Alabama and Tennessee itself here going into overnight Monday into Tuesday. And by the time we're waking up Tuesday, very strong winds here. I mean, some of these gusts getting up near 60 miles an hour here near the Cumberland Plateau, not out of the question. That could very easily cause power outage issues. So make sure you've kind of got everything charged here going into our overnight Monday and into Tuesday. And those wind gusts will continue to stay quite gusty throughout the afternoon Tuesday as well. And even, not calming down too much until overnight Tuesday and going into our Wednesday when things kind of begin to chill out a little bit here in this part of the country. Now, rainfall totals in this area, again, not even the worst of the rain. Most of the heavy rain is going to fall to the south of you, but a good 1 to 3 inches of rain for much of the Ohio River Valley here, I think, is a pretty safe bet. So that combined with all that wind, again, could bring some problems here for some of those power lines. So make sure we're definitely thinking about that with kind of our preparation for this storm. Alrighty, only, I think 3 more regions total to get through here. We're going to go into the Mid-Atlantic, then the Northeast, and then we're even going to discuss Eastern Canada a little bit here as well, where they could be seeing some pretty high impacts as well out of this storm system. Alright, so starting in the Mid-Atlantic, again, all quiet today, all quiet Monday really as well. It's going into Tuesday morning and Tuesday afternoon here that the rain works on in. And we could very well start as a quick burst of heavy snow, I think, in the higher terrains of Virginia and West Virginia, kind of there along the border. But again, much like other areas back towards the west here, that warm air is very quickly going to move in and end any snow or ice that is occurring. Now, this is going into Tuesday afternoon. Again, you'll notice this big area of a lot of very heavy rainfall along the I-85 corridor from South Carolina up through Virginia. Again, going to bring, a lot of flooding problems, I think, in this part of the country as well, and also some severe weather problems. Again, this is where we also have that severe weather threat in the Eastern Carolinas, and this is Tuesday afternoon. You'll notice here's that line of, strong, gusty winds and very heavy rainfall, but in front of it is that warm sector. This is where we'll have to watch for any isolated storm cells to kind of fire up and form here along the I-95 corridor, I think, from South Carolina through North Carolina, most likely to see any tornado threat here on Tuesday afternoon before that line of very heavy rain and wind slowly works eastbound throughout the overnight Tuesday and getting into, again, this is about that midnight hour here between Tuesday and Wednesday. This line of storms finally moving offshore. And then by the time we're waking up on Wednesday, just some leftover northwest flow here in the mountains, seeing some of that snow kind of pile up there in those higher elevations before that kind of ekes on out of here. And we have a much nicer kind of Wednesday evening and Tuesday. All right, now the winds, again, will also be a problem here. This is Tuesday afternoon. You'll notice very strong winds in the higher terrains of West Virginia and North Carolina. Again, the highest peaks could gust up near 70, 75 miles an hour. Again, not widespread gusts at that level, but again, isolated spots could see hurricane-force wind gusts. Now, down into the Piedmont of the Carolinas, also very worried about strong winds and power outages here. From Charlotte down towards Columbia, back towards Florence, could see, winds gusting into the 50-mile-an-hour range here for Tuesday afternoon. And by the time we get into Tuesday evening, this is the latest European model. And you'll notice this is kind of off-the-charts levels of wind problems. Now, I don't think it'll necessarily be quite as strong as maybe this model is suggesting, but we could very well, again, have isolated spots, seeing winds gust here kind of near 70, 75 miles an hour from kind of Columbia towards Florence back up into Fayetteville, North Carolina. Again, power outages could be a big-time concern in this area as we have very strong storms moving on through here. And, again, likely to see severe weather out of that. Now, as we go overnight Wednesday into Thursday here, that wind and rain shifts off towards the coastline, and that could, definitely cause problems out there. But luckily, I think by the time we get into Wednesday, definitely some leftover gusty winds, especially up towards West Virginia and Virginia, but definitely nicer than what we're going to see for our Tuesday and Tuesday evening. Now, flooding is also a big-time concern in this area. You'll notice we also have a moderate risk of flooding here from Philadelphia up through kind of Trenton and into northern New Jersey here. And again, a lot of rain on the way, and we'll look at that here in just a second for the Northeast. But even surrounding areas through the Mid-Atlantic going to have a flooding concern as well, all the way down into upstate South Carolina. I imagine we'll probably get an upgrade in that flooding threat kind of here through some of the southern-facing slopes of the foothills of the Carolinas, where we're really going to ring out some high rainfall totals there. Places like Lake Toxaway, Lake Jocassee, kind of up even into sections of, the western North Carolina mountains. And really just I-85 northbound, I think is going to have a lot of rain here in South Carolina and North Carolina. So I think flooding threat will also kind of be expanded a little bit in that area and heightened as we get a little bit closer to this event. All right, taking a look at the Northeast. Again, we already discussed the first storm, so let's go ahead and move right into the second one. And here we go. This is Tuesday afternoon. Still pretty dry through much of New England, but here comes that precipitation very quickly. Snow breaking out in the higher terrains of Pennsylvania, New York, but all rain really along the I-95 corridor, really throughout much of this event and even beyond. Now, as I move this further ahead into time here, you'll notice that all of that snow kind of pushes up into sections of New York State, Vermont, New Hampshire, and Massachusetts. Now, the cold air supply here is not great, but I do think some folks kind of in your circled area here through Maine, Vermont, New Hampshire, maybe even portions of New York State could stay snow throughout this entire event, and should that occur, we're going to get a lot of it. Now, outside of there, again, very heavy rainfall along the I-95 corridor, going to cause flooding problems overnight Tuesday into Wednesday. And we're still holding on to snow here. Again, through some of those areas I circled there, likely piling up very quickly here, causing big-time travel disruptions. And going into about midnight Tuesday to Wednesday, again, very heavy stream of moisture off the Atlantic. This is why we're going to have flooding problems in here. Just a lot of wind and rain kind of pushing that precipitation inland. And that is going to cause, again, big-time problems. Now, the same thing that is happening, though, is we're getting all of that precipitation and moisture in the atmosphere kind of pushed up where we still have enough cold air, and we're going to get very heavy snowfall rates here into Vermont, New Hampshire, again, maybe extreme northeastern New York State there, and into much of Maine, and that continues into kind of the time we're waking up on Wednesday here, still holding on to very heavy snow through northern Vermont, New Hampshire, and much of Maine, while we're seeing very heavy rainfall there through kind of Boston and Bridgeport and Providence and kind of surrounding areas. Now, again, that snow continuing into Maine for our Wednesday morning and afternoon before finally we kind of clear on out Wednesday afternoon with just some leftover back-end lake effect snow, showers, and even maybe a couple rain showers, but we'll definitely cool down here on the backside of this storm system. Now, winds will also be a problem here, gusting quite strong here for our Tuesday evening and going into overnight Tuesday. Again, these are max wind gusts over a 6-hour period, so don't expect this the entire time, but very easily could gust up into those 60-mile-an-hour ranges here through much of Delaware, New Jersey, and into kind of the higher terrains of New York, Vermont, and New Hampshire. I'm sure Mount Washington up there is going to have quite the readings on its anemometer. Be interesting to see that, but again, all of this wind is going to be a problem for multiple reasons. One, obviously wind in itself is an issue, but all of this wind is coming offshore and pushing water inland and also just pushing in the upper layers any moisture from the ocean inland. So a lot of flooding concerns, very heavy snowfall concerns, and the Northeast is not going to be a stranger to very impactful storms. Okay, snowfall totals here in this part of the country. Again, I think the most we see is going to be up here into kind of New Hampshire and Maine. New Hampshire and Maine. I promise I know what states I'm looking at, where we could see more than a foot of snow out of this storm. Not out of the question. Other areas, obviously lesser amounts, especially where that rain-snow line kind of tries to push pretty far north here. But if you're north of kind of that red line I have drawn, I think we'll see some pretty good snowfall accumulations, even again up into upstate New York, where half a foot of snow not out of the question for some isolated spots there where we're able to hold on to snow the entire time. Alrighty, last area we're going to talk about here with this storm system, and I know I got a lot of viewers up into Canada, so I did want to discuss this here into eastern Canada. This is going to be a big-time storm for you folks. Likely widespread blizzard conditions. This is Wednesday afternoon. A lot of snow working up here into kind of some of these areas. Let me back this up actually a little bit because I know most of the people living in Canada are pretty far south here. So kind of up near, some of these southern Canadian cities could see some big time snow here overnight Tuesday into Wednesday. This is again still early Wednesday morning before eventually that snow kind of, slowly works off towards the north and east. And then we've got very heavy snow, falling in portions of Nova Scotia here and eventually up even into Newfoundland, seeing some heavy snowfall for our overnight Wednesday and into Thursday. Good news is, though, we kind of clear on out here by the time we go into our Friday afternoon with just some leftover snow showers. Snowfall totals in these areas, again, this is in centimeters, not inches. So, again, a big swath here kind of in east central Canada, 30 to 40 centimeters of snow, not out of the question. And, again, that could be blowing as well as we see, a pretty good amount of, wind here helping to cause even more issues. Through sections of Nova Scotia. Again, this is including snow left to come today as well as the next storm. But some pretty good totals here as well. Same story up for Newfoundland, where isolated spots could see upwards of 30 centimeters of snow. So, again, very active pattern up here in eastern Canada as well. Alrighty, that's the first storm. We've already gone pretty well over my 30-minute mark here, but we've still got more to talk about. So, I promise, just hang in there with me. I'll have the timestamps here. You don't have to watch the whole thing. But here we go. This is going into later this week. Obviously, we've got the snow in the Northeast right now. We've got this major storm system. We just broke down region by region, threat by threat. Well, another one is on the way here. This is going into this coming Friday, and here we are. Big-time low pressure developing along the Texas coastline. We've got a big boundary of Arctic air with warm Gulf air clashing here, and that's going to lead to a big-time storm system that could bring big-time snowfall totals here. Again, Friday afternoon, latest GFS model here, bringing that heavy snow through much of Oklahoma, Missouri, maybe even as far south as northern Arkansas, and eventually up into the Ohio River Valley. Now this storm, again, I talked about earlier how the Ohio River Valley was really just going to be dealing with the wind and rain with the first storm. Well, the second one could be your storm. In fact, I think this has the best shot at bringing blizzard conditions through Indiana, Ohio, sections of Pennsylvania that we've seen in quite some time. And you'll notice also to the south of there, still very heavy rainfall here into the Carolinas and Georgia, maybe even a bit of a severe weather threat, but if not that, flooding going to be a concern here as well with all of this moisture. Now, eventually this storm will move up into Canada as well, and behind it is when things get a little more interesting for our snow lovers in the south. You'll notice here comes high pressure diving southward, bringing cold air, and our blue lines here indicating that kind of rain-snow line, if you will, also diving quite far south. And should that occur, we could get something kind of like this to happen. Maybe another area of low pressure kind of forms along that boundary and tries to ride eastbound, bringing with it some snow. Not out of the question, and I'll be watching that threat later into January. I know a lot of folks from kind of Mississippi, Alabama, the Carolinas, Georgia, Tennessee have been left snowless so far this winter. I think the best shot we've got here is going to be that second half of January, and we'll be watching the pattern there for sure in that time frame. Now, how much snow could we see with this next storm system? Well, the chance of seeing at least 4 inches of snow, pretty, I don't want to say high, but, notable here through much of Michigan, Ohio, and I'll even bring this back a little bit, even back towards Oklahoma. We have some of those chances into the St. Louis area, Detroit, Pittsburgh, up towards Buffalo, and then even into our northeastern cities here, could see some big time snow out of this storm as well before that kind of moves on out of here. Alrighty, so that is one storm here, and two storms I guess we've talked about now. I also need to talk about, though, the cold air, because it's going to be a big-time problem. Now, what you're seeing on your map right now, this is that big-time storm that we talked about through really this entire video, region by region. That, again, moves on out of here going into the Wednesday, Thursday time frame, but look what's happening back in the Pacific Northwest. A big area of cold air diving southward here into much of Washington State, Oregon, Idaho, Montana, very cold air, and eventually kind of tries to work eastbound. Now, this is going into this Friday, really this Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Again, that cold air moves into the Pacific Northwest. But by the time we go into this coming weekend, again, about a week from now, look at all this cold air trying to slowly work eastbound. And should that happen, and should we be able to get another area of low pressure to form here, again, could be looking at winter weather chances potentially in the southern half of the country. And that blue area really kind of hangs around for a while here. Goes even pretty far out there into the end of January. Now, what does this mean in terms of temperatures? Again, look at all of this very cold, colors showing up on your map. This is going into this coming weekend. Temperatures here could be 30 degrees below what they should be this time of year through much of the Great Plains here. And you'll notice as that's happening, we're still very warm in the east. We're going to have to wait for this cold air to slowly work eastbound, but I definitely think it does here. And you'll notice again, about a week out from now, that cold air pushes on through, and just about the entire lower 48 here has well below average temperatures. And with as active as the storm track has been, if we have all this cold air, we really just need one more storm to show up, and we could have another big time storm going into next weekend. So our latest GFS ensemble members, again, show this very well. Big area of troughing and cold air. Again, this is about a week from now through much of the country. All it's going to take is a storm to kind of form here and ride along this trough, and it will not be out of the question to see something like that for us to maybe get some kind of southern snow or ice event. So, again, I'll be watching that here in the long range and, keeping you up to date. But for now, we've got a lot more to get through. We still have snow in the Northeast today. We've got a big-time storm this week. And then, whatever else January has in store, I'm sure it's going to be quite an active month here. Again, I do appreciate you guys hanging in there with me. I know this was a long video, a lot of information here, but it's important to get out as we do have a very impactful event on the way. With that said, though, hope you have a great rest of your Sunday here, and I'll see you all tomorrow.